Okay. Good evening, everybody, wherever you are, all around the world. I'll say, how can I stay? We are basically, this is the first broadcast from the Emerging Alkebulan. My name is Oladile Dosumu. On the panel today, I'll let them introduce themselves. Milton, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, sure. Milton Allimadi, based here in New York City, with one of the comrades, your sister Nduku, your co-host on Kumbukeni. And I also publish Black Star News, which is found on blackstarnews.com. I teach African history at John Jay College here in New York City, and I teach journalism at the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia University. And I consider myself a dedicated and committed Pan-African. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Sister?
Nduku Mulumba, again, as my brother just said, co-host on Kumbukeni, which we just got off from. And it's good that we're here continuing this work. I am also, I guess, now adding to my badges, a Kiswahili language educator, teaching my fellow brothers and sisters in the diaspora the language so that we can find our commonalities in the language that we speak, an African language. But yes.
Thank you. And Brother Faisal?
Okay. I can't hear you. I'm just going to pretend that I heard that. My name is Faisal. I'm from Cape Town.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm really struggling to hear, but I think that was my cue. And I must apologize. I'm still learning how to be comfortable with introducing myself. So I'm going to stick with being Faisal for now. And I like talking about the things that we're going to be discussing tonight, which is why I was actually eager and keen and early. It's not always easy to be early. So all I can hope for is that, you are here now, so just hear us out and share some of your thoughts, maybe post the event, and then we take hands and we march into this bright future that is called the emerging Alkebulan. Not looking back to this misnomer called the Dark Africa of yesteryear. I think the hope for the world is firmly nestled in this formerly dark continent. So I'm excited, and I'm really hoping you won't be disappointed.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna go. My name, as I said, is Oladile Dosumu. I'm basically one of the founders of the Emerging Alkebulan. Why the Emerging Alkebulan? I'm one of those guys. I'm just giving a little background as to why we started this journey. I'm one of those guys who been frustrated for years. Obviously, born in the UK, lived in Nigeria for a bit, and then I go back and forth. And I just realized and see that as Africans, we tend to overanalyze the challenges. We know everything. Basically, it doesn't matter who you speak to. We all seem to know what the problems are. But for some reason, the work that needs to be done to get us to where we need to get to from where we are doesn't seem to happen. So I got sick and tired of complaining. I just don't want to complain no more. I thought to myself, you know what? Let's get off our butts, and excuse my language, off our backsides, and let's do something about this. And that's basically where I started to network with a lot of people through networking, through LinkedIn, looking for like-minded people who think, I thought I was on my own. And then I realized there's a lot of firebrands out there who are frustrated just like I was and I am, and are looking for somebody to just let out the steam with. So, and that's basically where we got together. So what, let's just do something about this. Obviously, we started this journey probably about over a year ago. It's taken us a while to get here because trying to get people from over the globe to work together with different time zones and all that kind of stuff, it can be strategically very hard to do. But we're putting it together. We're doing it, and we'll keep moving. And that's basically the reason why the Emerging Alkebulan was formed. Our aim basically is to get Africans, no matter where you are. If you're a Black man, you're African. Our journey has kind of led us all over the world. Obviously, we know how we got there and how happened. We're not going to go into that right now. But if you're a Black man, you're an Alkebulan. And my thought is, it doesn't matter where we are. If we can pull ourselves together do something we've never done before. Because one of the problems or one of the challenges we face as Black people all over the world right now is the fact that we don't never seem to tend to unite. Our indoctrination, our education has made us see ourselves as enemies. You know, we kind of, there's a kind of self-perpetuation where we say we just cannot work together. I hear that we can't work together so often. And I get frustrated when people say that. Yes, we can't work together. Why can't we do something about working together? Why do you have to keep saying it and you're not even making any effort? So these are the things that I've seen that's made us say, you know what, let's do something about it. And that's what's given birth to the Emerging Alkebulan. We are a think tank. We're a think tank group collaborating with people. We're gonna do educational. We got so much grand plans. I'm not gonna go into details, guys, but all I can say is go into our website, www.thealkebulans.com. I'll put it in the group chat. Check out our vision, our mission statements. They're there. But we just started. We're just getting things going. You know, I don't know where it's gonna lead us, but I just feel that we just need to do something. We just need to do something. And the key is basically we need to collaborate. We need a mindset shift. One of the things we're going to be talking about today is basically we're going to give the floor to Milton, who's going to take us through the journey. We need a mindset shift. We need to collaborate, and we need to unite. Those three key things are basically what we need to do as Africans to pull together. It's very, very, very important. You know, we on LinkedIn, I post a lot. Most people see my posts on LinkedIn. I post a lot because I'm so passionate about the fact that we just need to work together. I'm sick and tired of basically the narratives that have been painted about us. You know, we are the Alkebulan. We are mother of mankind. We were before anybody else. And then for us to feel so inferior that we kind of follow the narratives. And it's kind of frustrating, but I'm just not going to rant. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to let Faisal go. Faisal, if you want to take it from there, and then we're going to go into our program today. Basically, we're just going to talk about Africans the way forward. This is the first in a series of so many broadcasts. We're going to be bringing this to you every month with different speakers. We're basically talking about different topics and the way forward. And as we talk, as we learn, we're not just going to talk. Then we're going to put some action in place to move it forward, and that's the key: action. Because this is basically what we don't do as Alkebulans and Africans. We can over spiritualize things, but when it comes to doing the work, we tend to fall back and we don't do nothing. So I'm just going to pass it over to Faisal. Faisal's going to say a few words. He's part of the Emerging. He's one of the members of our group. He's going to talk for a bit, and then we're going to pass it over to Mr. Milton.
Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, like I said, it's nice for me to be here. We're having a really important conversation. And I think for me, as a scene setter, it's probably, I always say it's important for us to understand and get ourselves into a position where we can answer the question, how did the world come to be the way that it is? I think Milton and Duko Oladile, they're probably tired of me saying this, but I will be saying this for the next 50 years, as at least as long as I live, because it is a very critical question that we don't ask. We never get asked this question. And therefore, if there is a premise, then we have to say, okay, so what is this world that we don't know how it got to be the way that it is? And the short, crude answer, a big portion of the human population don't like this answer. But that's the thing about truth, isn't it? It's not comfortable for everyone. The world we live in is a white world. Whether you like it or not, look out your window, it's all white ideas. The world we live in is also a male world, patriarchy. Again, look out the door, look out the window, go outside. Men get paid more than women, even when women have been proven to do better at any job than any man. We also live in a Christian world. And yeah, I have to go Christian world, because I have taken it upon myself as a Muslim to study Christology and another discipline in Christianity called textual criticism. So these three things is how I characterize the world. And therefore, for me, it becomes easy. How do we then change this world? Well, if we've given whiteness a chance, then, 2,000 years later, let's give black a chance. and see how that goes for the next 2,000 years. If men got us where we are, let's give women a chance for the next 2,000 years. And if Christianity got us here, let's go for a deeper spirituality where people like you and I don't abdicate our responsibility to build a relationship with the Creator by paying tithes and going to church on a Sunday, to mosque on a Friday, and so on and so on. But we take a personal responsibility to connect with God, and it's very easy to do that. Our ancestors all did it. They stuck their hands in the ground, they planted, they went into nature. It's very easy to connect with God when you are in nature, but we are so busy. And actually, we've been wired to be so busy. I mean, if you look at all the images of people buried in their cell phones, walking over cliffs, this is the world we live in. And I think if we then unpack these things, Oladile, then we also live in a world where the North dominates by design and desire the South. And that includes Africa. And therefore, and we can take, courage, encouragement, and hope from BRICS and other Southern multilateral organizations and processes, where the balance of forces, the balance of power is shifting. And it's for the better, because the North, the global North, the West, even if Australia and New Zealand isn't in the West, they want to be in the West, they call themselves the West. They are shaking in their boots because the global South right now is working to undermine almost everything that they hold dear, including the dollar, including military power. Imagine Russia, China, India, Brazil, the entire Africa, the entire Latin American continent, the entire Orient and the Southeast Asia. Imagine, just think for yourself how things could be different. So we came together and we said, okay, we can't speak for Southeast Asia or the Orient or Latin America, but we can speak for Africans. And the lucky thing for us is that Africans live everywhere. And there are two main enemies to the African aspiration. And those two enemies, again, most people won't like this, but this is me. I just speak off the cuff, right? The number one enemy of the African aspiration is white people, Caucasians. They have hated African. They came here, they were dumbfounded, confounded, astounded at the amount of magnificence and civilization they found here, and then they stole it and took it with them. And ever since that, they did what they do best. They take the memory and the knowledge of this magnificent Africa, and they start to distort it. And then as time goes by, after generations, they actually change it around. And so they erase the memory. It's a complete silent genocide, right? But the success of it must be measured on this. We now believe as Africans that they are right, that they didn't steal, that they are the beacons and the bastions and the epitome of civilization. And so we have bastardized ourselves. And so therefore you get the self-loathing, this Afro-pessimism from Africans, So in fact, those are the two biggest. So it's the white man and the African self-loathing. Those are the two biggest problems that we have to deal with. And again, what the hope actually lies in the one thing that they don't want. That this guy from Cape Town and that lady from Cairo unite as one. Because you know what? African unity is the most scary thought for Caucasians, for the global North, for the West. Because if we reunite and become that united force that we once were, we will beat them off this continent again. And I'm not necessarily warmongering or talking, I'm just saying, once you identify your enemy, you have to deal with that enemy, or that enemy will continue to be with you. And if he continues to be with you, he is always going to be sitting on your head with his boots on your neck. And that's the rationale d'existence for the emerging Alkebulan. Our main aim is to couch these truths in a blunt, crude, straightforward way. You don't have to think about this. You just have to hear and digest. And like, if it doesn't sit well with you, discard. If it sits well with you, take hands with somebody. Go and do something in your village, in your city, in your town, in your region, in your country. You know, we need to actually move away from this thing that, oh, I'm from ECOWAS, I'm from SADC. No, no, no. We are from Africa. And we need to inspire our own leaders, you know, these elected leaders who are pillaging our national coffers in our name for the sake of their bosses in Europe. We need to be more conscious about who we're electing, because we are complaining about them year in and year out, and year in and year out we go to those polls and we re-elect the same kind of people. So take responsibility for the African condition and then work on changing that condition. And that's what we want to do at the emerging Alkebulan. We want to call ourselves what we call ourselves, not what we were told by the enemies of the African people to call ourselves. And we need to be teaching our kids this. And we need to be teaching in a way that galvanizes and inspires the individual and collective African brilliance. I mean, I don't know when last people looked at the kind of innovation that in 2022, 2023, just came out from kids. I mean, I'm talking 10-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds. The innovation, some of them go to the Guinness Book of World Records. Others get usurped, sucked up by, assimilated by America, because they see what they see. They always see dollar signs. They see gold there's these two kids from Kenya, two girls. They made a internal combustion engine running on urine, on pee. You know, there's another two kids. They designed X-ray glasses for going hiking, and somebody gets falls as a bad fall, and you put on the glass, you can see if it's a fracture or not. These are amazing, essential innovations. Imagine Africa was actually free, actually resourced, actually corruption free. What are these young people all going to come up with? Right? We are going to change this world just with having thoughts and ideas which we pursue until it becomes a material reality. So we need to be educating our own people, and then we need to start engaging with each other at a cultural level, at a philosophical level, at a religious level, spiritual level, I prefer. But most importantly, at an economic level. Because like the adage goes, and I'm going to end off with this, Oladile, we can go with more detail as we go on. But like the adage says, it's the economy, stupid. I think those are my first words. I hope everyone didn't have any audio problems hearing that.
You're muted. Olodele, you're muted.
Oh, yes. Excuse me, guys. So I do apologize. Olivia, you want to go first, and then we let Milton take over the stage, please. Yeah, if you want to go, please.
Chisanduku, you're muted.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So what's the question, my brother? Remind me again as we continue to speak. I got so much caught up in what Faisal was talking about. It's broad. What would you like me to speak on specifically?
Basically, just a brief background in terms of what we're trying to talk about. Africa, which way forward, mindset, collaboration, unity. We got 3 different topics, but just give us a little background, and we're going to let Milton just take over, please.
Yes, you put them out. How do we change our mindsets? How do we unite? How do we collaborate? Right? Those are the 3 things that we have issues with currently.
Yes.
So changing our mindsets, this is one of the things that we need to do, right? We need to start reading, looking into history, learning about ourselves, learning about our African history, and then embodying that Africanness that we find in those books of history. We need to reconnect. For those of us in the diaspora, I'm born and raised Kenyan, but I have been living in the diaspora. Cannot wait to go back home. But if you are a descendant of enslaved Africans outside of Africa, you need to start reaching. You have Africans amongst you now, we diasporans who've come from the continent. Connect with them, start eating with them, see how similar. I get on calls, in meetings, in conversation with Africans, descendants of enslaved Africans in the Americas, and they always are surprised by the similarities. Just yesterday, we were talking about culture, and there were things about the Kiswahili culture during the Kiswahili classes were very similar to Jamaican culture that came about. They're very similar about how we dance. We were talking about the winding of the waist. That's a very, very common aspect to African dance. In every part of Africa, you'll be winding the waist. But where else do you find that? You'll find it in Jamaica. They're winding their waists. You'll find it in Brazil. You'll find it in the US. They're winding their waists. And this is our Africanness that we need to reconnect with. Do not be ashamed to dress like my brother Oladele and myself in your African attire. Do not be ashamed to support African textile industry and wear African. Do not see it as... I remember when I was still working in an office, when I started decolonizing my mind, and I intentionally made sure that I made outfits that I could wear in the office that were African. And I intentionally did that. I had days where on Fridays, because Fridays were dress down days, I would do the whole headgear thing. I was like, this is my dress down. This is how we dress down in Africa. And I'm going to come in my full African presence. Do not be afraid to bring your fufu to work. Let them smell it. Let them complain about how much it smells, but you know you're eating your African food and connecting with your Africanness. Do not be afraid to eat for the Africans in the US. Do not be afraid to sit and eat your watermelon and fried chicken and continue. Let them talk about you, but you know that is the richness of your food. And there was a reason why Africans ate watermelons and fried chicken, right? We found joy and food and sustenance even in the worst conditions, and we made it a part of us, and we found joy in us. Do not be embarrassed to do that. So let's reconnect with our culture. That's how we change our mindset. The other way, and we were talking about it on Kumbukeni today as we talked about Baba Sankara, is let's not shy away from minimizing our standards of living, right? Because this excessive constant accumulation is what is exploiting. And as a people who are exploited, we should not be a part of that. And I've said this in communities where I'm speaking in the Kiswahili class that we have. I say, there's no reason why any African should have millions of dollars in their account. None. When other Africans are suffering. None. As long as your bills are paid, you have good health care, you have a means of transportation, you have food. Now start distributing your wealth elsewhere. Invest in the community. There's no reason why money for us who are marginalized should be sitting in an account accumulating when there are things that money can be used to support the community. How do we unite? We unite by stopping identifying ourselves by the borders that were created by people who are not us, by oppressors, right? I've been in rooms and some of the people who want to challenge me come in and ask me, where are you from? Where are you from? I'm African. Be okay with that. I know where I'm from. They say to me, I'm embarrassed to say where I'm from because my country is probably not doing well. And it makes me laugh. But we're African. Myself and Oladele are not different. Look at us. We're dressed the same today. We look the same. We eat the same. We sing the same. So why would I want to differentiate myself from who Oladele is? Even when we sound different in our accents, there's something similar in the way we speak. There's something similar in the way we our intonation, the way we express ourselves. I know Africans when I'm walking in New York City, just by the way they talk. I'll be like, oh, that's an African. No matter what language they are speaking. So let's unite and let's stop using these. And it's not just the borders, right? It's the this is a good Negro type of thing where certain Black people are held up so that we, the rest of us, can see this is what you should be. This is what the white man wants you to be. No, let's not divide. And for those Black people who allow themselves to be used as that, that's who the problem is. They should reject that. And we can talk about this as far as countries, right? Rwanda, just yesterday, Rwanda was the country to be looked at in Africa. This is what the West was doing, right? This is the country you should look at. Look at how much progress. Now it's Kenya. All of a sudden, Kenya is the country to look at. And they always do that so that Uganda feels bad, so that Tanzania feels bad, so that the other countries around that country that is being held up feels bad. And so that they associate that excellence with partnership with the West, right? Which is, again, dividing us. So there are many ways that they've divided us. There's the light skin, the dark skin amongst Africans. There's no difference between myself and Faisal. Open Faisal up, you will see he will bleed the same way as I bleed. Put pain on Faisal, he will feel it the same way I feel it. Denigrate his blackness, he will feel the same way I feel it about it, despite the fact that our skin colors shades is different. So that's another way that we are divided, and I urge all Africans to stop falling for it and to unite. Our unity, which is the reason why it's so hard to accomplish, is our we say in Kiswahili, umoja wetu ndio ngao na nguvu yetu. Our unity is our shield and our strength. And until we realize that, we will forever be subjugated. But when we do realize that, it's going to be, what's it called? A cakewalk, whatever you call it, an easy walk to liberation. How do we collaborate? Myself and Milton just came from Kumbukeni, but our brother is launching something and we came on to support him. That's one way of collaborating. How do we collaborate? You see an African starting a business, you support them. How do we collaborate? When Milton comes to us and tells us that his book is being stopped from distribution and that they are taking over his ownership of his own words, we come and support him when he goes to GoFundMe and tells us, I need to release this book from the arms of the oppressor. How do we collaborate? Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. Well, I was talking to one of my brothers yesterday from Tanzania. He was saying how they have food, lots of food just getting spoiled, and it's not going to Kenya. And Kenya needs that food. It's not going to Uganda, and Uganda needs that food. So how do we collaborate? The Kenyan government and the Ugandan government and all African governments should collaborate to make sure that whatever we have in excess and you need is going to your country. So let's make sure we open up the paths of trade, right? The trucks that are going, the railway that is going. There's many ways to collaborate. Those are just a few that I would name today.
Thank you, Nduku. Brother Milton, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes. All right. So, comrades, first a heads up. I can stay in our conversation until 4 p.m. if that's okay. If that works, I hope. No, really. I have to be at another.
Is that the next 30 minutes?
At 4:30. No, it's only 2:30 now. So
yeah,
more than 2 hours.
Yeah, we have, yeah.
One thing I discovered. Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me today. I really feel honored that I'm in the midst of comrades who are serious about reversing our situation, our condition, and improving our place in the global system, which is the problem. We're in a dependent and very peripheral location in the global system. And that is, of course, because of the history of capital and how capital commodified us through enslavement, and then, of course, through colonialism, and now the era of neo-colonialism. So every time, as Rodney used to like saying, Walter Rodney, the system always finds answers. After slavery was no longer convenient to the expansion of global capital, they had to make modifications. So that's where colonialism came into place. Colonialism was no longer tenable at some pace when the masses had elevated consciousness and were fighting against the contradictions. How can you be preaching democracy and freedom and all this nonsense while you continue to subjugate and exploit us? So they came up with a new form, right? Now they have, instead of European governors, now we have fellow so-called Africans who are playing the same role as the European governors played during the colonial era. And of course, now the enforcers, they don't always have to have the troops on the ground Occasionally they do, of course, when they send intervention like NATO in Libya. But mostly they do it through the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Those are the enforcers. And then, of course, they recruit African soldiers as mercenaries to intervene in affairs. And they use Africans like General Museveni in the past, General Mobutu, as the resident marshals or sheriffs in the region, with European and American resources and technology and arms, with African soldiers on the ground to intervene in situations that they don't like. But you posed a big question, the way forward. I think it is very difficult to move forward without knowing where we came from, without knowing the past. And that is why we can't avoid but to reclaim some knowledge from the past in order to fortify us and prepare us for today and tomorrow. So I find that where I teach at John Jay College, every class, every semester, I want to make sure every student that steps into that class is transformed by the end of the semester. So I expose them to Antajob. And of course, every African and Europeans for that matter, and all other people should be exposed to Antajob and the African origins of civilization and his other teachings. It is widely known, but it's not widely taught, especially in our African communities, whether on the continent or everywhere, that had the original inhabitants of the African continent, and of course they were not referred to as Africa because the word Africa did not exist at that time, but had those original human ancestors not left what is now the African continent about, and it's estimated from 60 to 80,000 years ago, and gone to other parts of the world, and through adaptation to climate and environment over a period ranging from 30 to 40,000 years. Had that not happened, everybody on the earth today look like us, engaged in this conversation today. So with that knowledge, which of course even Europeans know, how can any African feel inferior to anyone? The self-loathing, self-inferiority complex only comes about because this knowledge is hidden, although this knowledge is widely available in Antajob's books. But you find that Antajob is rarely even taught in African countries. So my students here at John Jay, young students from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Senegal, are asking me, Professor, why are we learning this for the first time here at John Jay when I come from an African country? And that is the challenge. That is the challenge. We are holding back our potential by not exposing the 1.3 billion Africans on the continent and globally to the right type of basic knowledge that they need to know. Every student that leaves my class at the end of the semester, most of them come back to tell me they've shared this information with their siblings and with their parents as well. Some students told me at the end of the semester, when we were teaching online via Zoom during the pandemic, I didn't know this, but at the end of the semester, they told me that their entire family would be sitting and listening to this knowledge. So we need to start off from that basic foundation to know that every human being today, even the ones that are most hostile to people that are now referred to as Africans, owe their existence to the people who left that continent between 60 to 80,000 years ago. So let's start with that. And then number two, let's teach them that Antajob proved using the equipment in his scientific laboratory at the University of Dakar that the original Egyptians, before the word Egypt existed, because that's not an African word, when it was Kemet, those were Black Africans. And he proved that by testing the melanin content. So that's not even an issue to debate anymore. But look at capital and white supremacy, how that information is being suppressed. in Egypt. In Egypt, they still sell the Hollywood narrative of a European Egypt, when anybody can go online and Google Pharaoh or Emperor Nama, Narmer, or Menes, Menes, and a bust will appear, the image of his bust. And you ask yourself, why didn't I not cut off the nose of the image of that bust? And that will answer that question. And he was the first king of a unified Kemet, 5,200 years ago. But a civilization had existed even before dynastic Egypt started 5,200 years ago. And a civilization existed in what is now the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert was once lush and green, and they've discovered rock paintings in parts of Algeria showing the Sahara Desert with the people who existed there 10,000 years ago were riding on horse-pulled chariots. They had the games that were later duplicated centuries later in Greece and Rome. They had already cultivated and domesticated cattle. They were growing food and practicing agriculture. And this knowledge is also being kept from our people. That is why it's important for us to go backward first and learn that history. Because once you have this knowledge, then nobody can make you feel inferior. Because once you start absorbing inferiority complex, then you start doubting yourself. Why am I inferior to Europeans? Why are they so successful? They're so successful because at one point you were actually ahead. But after the intervention, they destroyed your civilization, they destroyed your culture, they hijacked some of the knowledge, and of course, even the artwork, which you see in the great museums around the world right now. How can barbarous and primitive people be producing that type of artwork? Like the Benin art, the Benin bronze, for example. How can a savage people produce something like that? And I tell my students, if those Africans in Kemet were not responsible for the pyramids, if it came from Asia or from Europe, why did they not build some pyramids in Asia and Europe before they came to Africa? So we have to know this basic knowledge. And I think once we unleash this knowledge to our people, then they're prepared to engage with what needs to be done today and what needs to be done tomorrow. So now let me update it and bring it to the more recent era, the era after independence. There's a lecture which I love. It's on YouTube. It's called Crisis in the Periphery, Africa and the Caribbean, by our brother, Walter Rodney, whom I admire tremendously because he knows how to break it down. He knew how to break it down the way Malcolm X used to know how to break it down. Complex things, just break it into ordinary phrases and explanations that people can easily relate to. So he says, independence was important. You can't deny its historical achievement. But independence was not sufficient. Independence just gave us the tools and the potential of now turning and improving our global position in the global economy. But, as you said, the system always finds answers. The Europeans made sure that the elite who took over the mantle, the first generation at least, had a European mindset. They emulated Europe. They aspired to be Europeans. And as Fanon said, if that's what you want to do, why not let the Europeans do it? Because they're better in turning you into a European. Why would you want to do it for yourself? But unfortunately, that's what we inherited. So they were not able to change or even challenge our exploited and marginalized economic position in the global system. 1884 was Berlin Conference. They set up the system where Africa became the new plantation, producers of raw material, providers of cheap labor, and consumers of manufacturers coming from Europe. That was 1884. We're in 2023. Nothing has changed. There's not a single industrialized African country today. We are still producers. Look at a powerful country like Nigeria. having to produce petroleum, exporting it as petroleum, crude oil, and then importing refined oil to its own citizens. It doesn't get any worse than that as a manifestation of how we have failed to transform our economic system. And as I said earlier on, the new enforcers are the World Bank and the IMF. They give you loans. The loans come with conditions, and the condition prevents you from industrializing. So cocoa is produced in Ghana and Ivory Coast and sold cheaply in big bags and then sent back to them in nice, well-decorated, colorful boxes, costing 50 or 100 times more, a multiple, as the original ingredient with which they cannot even make the chocolate. That's just an example. Coltan, cobalt, uranium, gold, diamond, you name it, all the resources that we have in abundance, but it's used by everybody else to create wealth and prosperity and then send it back as so-called manufactured products, as if manufacturing is somehow nuclear science, which it is not. It's just being allowed to build your factories and have enough of a market to sell the manufactured products. And they prevent that by keeping us as these small, isolated, tiny 54 countries. The borders that Sister Nduku spoke about in the beginning, so that my market is 48 million Ugandans, max. That is not a good incentive to produce manufactured items. But if we see the entire African continent with 1.3 billion people as the market for our manufacturers, then of course we can start the manufacturing to transform our continent, create wealth and prosperity using our resources. Now the outside world comes and takes our products for cheap, and they use the 1.3 billion Africans as their market. You don't find England saying, oh, I'm only going to deal with Kenya. I'm only going to deal with Uganda. I'm only going to deal with Nigeria. No, their market, 1.3 billion. And that is why trade within Africa itself is less than 17%. Think about that. Meaning our trade with the outside world is more than 80%. If you go to Europe, trade amongst Europeans is 80%. Amongst Asians, 80%. The United States and the rest of the European world, 80%. I think I've laid out the groundwork, and you see the challenge we face. And of course, there are Africans who have known how to challenge this arrangement. And we know what happened to them. Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Modibo Keita, Thomas Sankara. There's so many more. Some were not even allowed to take over leadership in their country. Amilcar Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane, Steve Biko. Steve Biko, who, by the way, said, if we think ending apartheid is just changing the color of the managers of state affairs, then we are greatly mistaken. It would have been as if apartheid never ended. There's an interview on YouTube. It's called Interview with Steve Biko. It's about 27 minutes, and anybody will hear that he had the correct analysis. Thank you. So those are my opening comments.
Whoa, that's deep. Thanks, Brother Milton. That's really, really deep. And then just based on what you're saying, as you've laid the groundwork, the foundations, as you guys can see, there's a lot to pick apart and there's a lot to do. But from the key thing there, and what my brother is saying, is this: the lack of unity amongst ourselves, the mindset and the indoctrination, which is the education. These three things we need to basically change it. I can be so impassioned about this because I post about this all the time. And one of the biggest challenges I face as a diasporan, as an African, is the fact that my brothers and sisters are the ones who push back the most. They're basically the gatekeepers of the hegemony.
Right.
That's one of the biggest challenges I face. When I post and I put stuff out there, you just see them come up and just trying to defend the indefensible, indefendable, be it the education, be it the religion, be it whatever it is. Because all these things, if you guys look, all these things have been put in place to keep us to where we are. The education, look at us. Our education, our curriculums in Africa, there's nothing African about it. There's nothing African about education, guys. You just
Yes.
look at education. They obviously through colonization, they brought it to us. You know, one of the challenges we're facing basically, when is our so-called I say intellectuals, our African professors,
Right.
ever going to think that, you know what, the education that we're going through is basically irrelevant
Right.
to Africans?
Right.
When are we actually going to think to change that paradigm?
Right.
That's
No,
not happening right now.
we need to produce that content ourselves, because that's the
Yes.
most dangerous content that they will do everything possible to prevent us from producing that content. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the Kenyan author, wrote about that, decolonizing the mind, right? Okot Bitek, the Ugandan, also wrote about that in Africa's Cultural Revolution, also mocking these academics in our institutions for trying to ape Europe. So I recommend these two books, Decolonizing the Mind and Africa's Cultural Revolution. I also recommend Decolonial Marxism by Walter Rodney, which I believe came out last year. And he also has 3 very good chapters on education. Says the education system, of course, was meant to make Africans subservient to the colonial system. And unfortunately, that education system was not changed significantly, even after so-called independence. But we need to produce more content on this issue and look at the contempt that we have for our education in African countries. The Minister of Education in Uganda is the wife of the dictator. Her name is Janet Museveni, General Museveni's wife. And when she applied to get into the university in Uganda, she was initially rejected, but the file disappeared. So a new file was created showing her being accepted, and that's how she somehow got her postgraduate qualification and made her qualified to be the Minister of Education. But somebody who was very alert made copies of the original rejection letter. So we have somebody who could not get into the institution in Uganda, who is now the Minister of Education because she's married to the country's ruler.
Yeah, so bro, and just to back up on that, and that's the educational perspective in terms of why we are where we are. This is the reason why, like you just said, this is the reason why we need to change that. Like I said, I was in Nigeria recently, and I just find it, how can Africa, Nigeria, trying to be more Western than the Westerners? I found that just, I don't know, it was mind-boggling. How can you, as an African country, be more Western than Westerners? And this one concept that when I was in Nigeria, I couldn't wrap my head around that concept. Everywhere I go, it was just mind-boggling. We're trying to get away from hegemony. And you guys, like, hook, by crook, by every way necessary, trying to get into slavery instead of getting yourself away from slavery. And the sad thing is, like, this is Africa. This is not even the West.
Right. No,
and that's how deep.
One of my students told me last week, she's from Cameroon, that in Cameroon, and they have a certain department store that sells winter boots and winter coats.
What?
And fur hats in Cameroon at 5 or 6 times the price of the winter items in Paris. And I said, so how does that even make sense? This is what they're selling. If you need these items because you're going to Europe or what have you, why don't you buy it once you get there? Why would you have these products sold in the stores in your country? That's number one. And then number two, the prices of foods or vegetables are much, much cheaper in the outdoor markets, the so-called African markets. But everybody wants to go into the supermarket, and all the supermarkets are French, have French names. And the prices, of course, are several multiples higher, and the items are not even fresh. So, for example, the orange and pineapple juice sold in the stores are not used with domestically produced oranges or domestically produced pineapples. I didn't know France was a major producer of pineapples or oranges. They must be produced in greenhouses or something. But those are the products sold in the department stores in Cameroon. That to me was a very glaring and a very appropriate example. But the reason she was able to tell me this is because now these are some of the things that we're discussing today that we discussed in our classes as well. And now they can see, she had never seen it as absurd before until we put it in context. And that reminded her, and that's why she brought it up. So this is the kind of thing we need to communicate to a lot of our young people so they can start seeing the contradiction and start rejecting the contradiction.
But it's also part of that critical analysis where you start looking at the facts and then you compare them with what is being said and you try and find logic. And when there's no logic, you figure out what the explanation is, which is what we should do instead of just following along with what is said to us.
No, absolutely. She said she used to go to the department stores, but now if she goes back to Cameroon, she's not going back to those stores. She's going to go to the outdoor so-called African market now.
Okay, I'm just going to get Faisal in. If Faisal wants to add to that thought, and then we just talk about the solutions and how we go from where we are. Faisal, you want to go?
I don't know if he can hear you. Maybe you'd have to text him.
Yeah, I'm texting him right now.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Faisal?
Oh, that's a shame if we lose him.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see it. Hold on. Faisal, can you hear me?
I think it's freezing up a little bit.
Okay, it's struggling.
Yeah.
All right, Milton, I'll just let you go. We've talked about the content in terms of why we are where we are, the fact that our mindset is kind of indoctrinated, our education, our spirituality is kind of compromised.
Right.
But Africans know, a lot of Africans know this, and some of us say, okay, how do we get away from this? You know, some of us are stuck.
Right.
And some of us they want to move, but they kind of find they struggle because obviously we're in the world, and that world, as you know, is kind of completely compromised. You know, if you don't be part of the world, then you struggle. So I'm at a stage where I'm trying to get away from the world to actually basically just get myself away. And I'm in the process of doing that. But a lot of people want to do that and they can't do that. So what can we do? What steps can we take to move us away from where the kind of compromised entities, the compromised structures, to free ourselves as Africans, because we need to do something different.
Absolutely. Well, the mindset is critical. Without the correct mindset, nothing can be accomplished. Because the media, as you know, corporate media are very aggressive and very busy in continuing to promote inferiority complex by constantly reminding us of the falsehood that European civilization was superior to Africa's, and that they so-called brought civilization to Africa. So they show the symbols of success in our contemporary era, all being Europe. The grand buildings of Europe that were built on African blood and the blood of indigenous people from all over the world. The factory products that come from Europe, all of that built from the blood of Africans and indigenous people, because without the original accumulation of capital, it was impossible to industrialize. Even the entertainment, the musical entertainment, the films that are propagated around the world, produced in Europe, denigrating the artistic creations that are produced in Africa. I see it's only recently now that some Nigerian artists are starting to break this trend and are now being widely promoted even by corporate media. So that is also another possible strategy for us to use to make sure that these artists that command such a vast following also understand, number one, their potential, but know themselves and know their history as well. Many African people around the world became conscious by following Bob Marley's music. So Bob Marley knew his potential power, and therefore he tailored his content in some of the songs to have that impact. When he spoke about Africa
Sorry,
Unite.
Milton, I was going to interject there. I was going to say Fela Kuti, man. He's my favorite.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes.
Oh, how can we leave out Fela? In fact, I went to see the play on Broadway. I saw it 8 times. That's how much I liked it. You see? And of course, Fela, by the way, is one of the artists that I also teach in my history class, because I teach him not as just a quote unquote musician, but somebody who was actually a fighter for Africa's independence, Pan-Africanism, and for human rights. So these artistic... Milton, yes, my brother. I'm glad you could join us. We were worried, man. Please. We want you to take the floor.
No, since we're interjecting, actually the sound is somehow miraculously better now.
Thank you.
Since we're
Join us.
Yeah, since we're interjecting, Africa has delivered quite a number of stars. Let's say superstars, artists, singers, and songsters, and so on. Let's say just in the last 10 years. But who are their idols? Who are they mimicking?
That is the problem.
Where do they want to be produced? Where do they want to live if it's not Bel Air or Paris?
Mm-hmm.
So I like what you are doing as an individual. I mean, you are teaching history, but also to, some people with lots of talent and aspiration and ambition and like they could put Africa on the map and so on. And we must never underestimate the power of one. Because this is one of the things I thought about. It's a challenge that I actually want to put to the audience. But the thing is, we need to completely understand how we got here, and then we need to understand what is here, and then we need to decide. But where's there? What does there look like?
Mm-hmm.
What is over there? Is that the African dream? So how do we get there? Get a map, get GPS, come up with the plans, and so on, Because if you look at the plight of the likes of Du Bois, Fanon, Pan-Africanist philosophers, let's call it that,
mm-hmm.
They said even African or Pan-African liberation theology becomes a difficult, and that's why I like what my sister was saying in the introduction when she was talking about her class in Swahili,
Yes.
Because now we as Africans, we are talking African liberation and African liberation theology, but we are using the language of the Caucasians, and we can't speak to each other from Cape to Cairo in an African language. So our problem is very complex because, in part, it is the making of the Caucasian enemy of black people everywhere in the world. In part, it is the making of black people over the world. So there's 50-50 responsibility. Even if they started doing this 5,000 years ago,
Yep.
There are too many of us who have woken up, and we need to look at a concept that Einstein said, if you don't understand it, you will pay it. And if you do understand it, they will pay you. And it's called the compound effect. And my challenge, coming back to that point, is if there's one African in the audience tonight who speaks to 10 of his buddies, 10 of his friends, 10 of his families,
mm-hmm.
that makes 11. And if the 10 agrees and it resonates with, like their inner self, like, let's lift the African continent up by our bootstraps, and they speak to 10, there's something on Google, you go Google compound calculator. But if enough people bring 10, there won't be space in Africa for everybody we're bringing. Good thing we're all over the world. But imagine There's an Alkebulan chapter in Australia, in Norway, in Italy, in Germany. You know, all these formerly fascist Nazi countries. And currently, I mean, Australia is a current, like the States and Britain, they're current Nazi company, fascist countries. But if we had a presence everywhere and we grow the people that you are teaching and we expand that footprint, this educational footprint, because more or less awareness, right? And
Absolutely.
we tell the African stories in the African tongues to African kids under African trees everywhere. There you have the makings of a revolution.
Yeah.
And so when I speak to my kids inside here, and you know, they love this. I don't know. I don't even know these American pop stars anymore. You know, because I mean, I gave that up. I don't know, 10 years ago. So I can't come with an example. But I say to them, you are listening to this. Let me hear you sing.
Young Jeezy, I
not
don't know.
So I say to them, no, that's not what I mean. Your papa means, can you sing something African? You know, or make something up and sing that. You know, because we have to start at some point.
Remember Miriam Makeba.
Yes.
Miriam Makeba, Brenda Fassie. I mean, there I can go on and on and on when it comes to African people and so on. But I think our challenge is complex because of the time that it's taken to perfect the social engineering program called dehumanization and ongoing divide and rule. They have dehumanized. Look, the other point I briefly
lost in there a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I do want to say this. Those two things plus the politics of destruction, Brother Milton, you'll be aware or familiar with this term, the politics of destruction. Let me illustrate it with a non-African example, but very topical. Everybody's consumed with what is happening in the Middle East right now.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you. Faisal is talking.
I don't think he can hear us. Can you hear us?
Faisal, continue. I'll send him a message. Continue.
Yeah, send him a message.
Okay. The entire world is consumed with what is happening in the Middle East. After 2 days, after 75 years of what is happening in the Middle East has been happening for 75 years. Right now, after 2 days, the global population is consumed and immersed with what is happening in the Middle East, and they're picking sides. And who is asking, what is Bill Gates doing? What is the WEF planning? When will the WHO announce the next virus? That's the politics of distraction. And so, when you have a Jacob Zuma in South Africa and he plunders the coffers and shares it with non-white people, the world is up in arms. But since Trevor Manuel shared the wealth of this country from Nelson Mandela's time with white people, we're not allowed to speak about that. So the enemy of the black man.
Ramaphosa as well.
I know, but Ramaphosa is how they call them the commander-in-chief, presidents of the world, they call the commander-in-chief. Besides Joe Biden, Cyril Ramaphosa is the most nauseating word for my ears, because he is I'm actually very serious.
Well, we can relate to that.
Very serious.
We can relate to that.
Because I call him the most disrespectful thief in chief in South Africa. You can't shove foreign currency in your couch and still be on the streets.
Yes.
And bullying, bulldozing, and ordering everyone around as if you are not a criminal.
Right.
This is an unconvicted criminal.
Yes, definitely. A bandit.
Right? But these, what an apt illustration. Next year, we're going to the polls again. Guess who's going to be the president after next year? This is the African problem. Who is going to be the president of South Africa after the 2024 elections? I can give you a hint.
It looks like a duck, walks like a duck.
There's a hashtag called CR17. We are going to elect the thief in chief again. That's what Africans do. Unless we follow the Mali example, the Burkina Faso example. Right? But we shouldn't allow those to the north of us to, because we have the Mali and the Burkina Faso example, to say, oh, the Gabon fits them. No, but because look, the point is, the French, as we all know, let's not talk about the others, because in my opinion, the French are the worst of them all, of the colonizers in 2023, right? When they want war, or when there's a hot potato in West Africa, they create conflict so that we are distracted. And are Africans easily distracted? Are Africans easily distracted? Yeah, hell yeah.
Yes, we are.
We are. Yeah, we are, you know. I mean, we can be saving somebody from bodily harm over here, and somebody puts a fire over there. We're going to leave this person, and we're going to go and try and put that fire out over there.
Absolutely. Even if it's a smaller fire.
No, exactly. That is the point. So we can't pretend to be having the answers, but we do need to consistently, continuously to problematize the African situation.
Yep.
Because the more we do that, the more the creative juices and the many heads that's joining this process will
unity
forge this African solution. Remember, there's an African dream in the heart of every African child that is born. It starts as a candle. Now, candle in the wind, you know, the lived realities and so on, that candle gets blown out. And you can see it in the eye of the African child. He's malnourished. He has no interest in life. He doesn't want to study. He doesn't want to. But we have also seen what happens when that African child rises above his own circumstances. My dream, as part of the African dream, is that we don't live in a world, or that we don't live in a world where the individual African child has to rise above his circumstances. No. Let us change those circumstances. Let us level the playing fields for every African child. I mean, another problem of the African condition, you have the oldest liberation movement on the continent. Here in my country, born in my country. And ever since it came into power, next year it'll be 30 years, it has never, not even once, introduced an education system through the Minister of Education that is born in Africa. They were all from Commonwealth countries, starting with the UK. Kada Asmal. I mean, I had endless problems. I was working in Parliament at the time. And guess where they went after that failed? They went to Australia. I mean, what?
Right.
At the same time, Milton, at the same time, the nanny that raised my babies the first time, the guy who helps me on the farm here, you know, the gardeners of my neighbors and so on. We have accountants and lawyers and engineers from Zimbabwe. There's only one river between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And they are looking after kids and planting carrots and cabbages. And we are looking over the sea, not across the river, for African solutions.
Well,
our leader, wait, I want to end off here. Our leaders are not our leaders.
No, they're not.
I agree.
I don't know if they represent you or your aspirations or your condition. Even if you believe they do, they don't.
No, they don't.
I think one of the benefits of having these type of platforms.
Okay.
Oladele.
I don't think Oladele can hear.
Brother Milton is speaking. Sorry.
Oh, go on.
I wasn't sure if you could still hear us.
Oh, yeah.
I feel so bad for the
Go on, Brother
comment.
Milton.
Okay. No, I was just going to say the good thing about having this type of platform, we can infect the minds of young people with good, positive, actionable information,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the good thing with having these platforms. One of the notes I actually scribbled before we started a conversation was that our number one mission should be to make it almost impossible for mediocre misrulers
Mm-hmm.
to survive for long in any African country. If we that make that part of our regular mission, that itself is success at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And we should always tell them that this is the vision of the Africa that we have, and this misruler cannot deliver on that. We should be a pain in their rear end, to use the same words that Oladele used.
They're not qualified. Mm-hmm.
They're not qualified.
Yeah.
Education. If you're still emulating Europe, that's like a national suicide, really. Education should be one of the most important portfolios in any government, even more than finance, although finance is critical. Every portfolio is critical. But with education, a properly educated populace would not tolerate an incompetent sellout minister of finance, minister of economic planning, minister of justice, any other department, minister of technology, you name it, starts with a properly educated populace that are making the demands that they know they deserve. Because now they know themselves, they know what they're worth, they know what to tolerate and what not to tolerate. And of course, Africans, even the ones that don't have formal education, they know what they're worth. That is why it's not very difficult to get the young Africans who are now coming out to the streets in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger. They don't have quite a clear idea of the Africa that can be created, but they know there must be something much, much
More different.
better than the current conditions which they live in. So that works to our advantage as well. So in a way, they're waiting for us to disseminate this vision of the Africa that we know we can help build and that they deserve. And that's where we should take advantage of the current.
I love listening to you. I love listening to you. And as a history teacher, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me which African country won their freedom?
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Well, I can say with some assistance, I can say the ones that fought wars of national liberation, like Guinea-Bissau,
Algeria,
Angola, Mozambique, Algeria, Kenya, but
to some
at
extent,
stage,
Kenya, yeah.
hijacked.
Yes.
Hijacked and compromised. Never had a chance to win national liberation and start implementing a plan. None of them ever had that opportunity. Because in the case of Angola, it was always a struggle for survival. So actually, it's contradiction. Did they really win? Because if you're not allowed to implement the vision that you had, can you ever say you really had victory? Same thing in Namibia.
And for those in Kenya, they were those who wanted change and did not want to compromise were arrested or put 6 feet under, right?
They were betrayed.
Yes, they were betrayed. So we have the problem in Africa of the African who wants to be favored by the white man and who wants to be paid by the white man who's always betraying. That's a very big problem in Africa that we need to figure out how we're going to sort out.
No, but he's right. That's a very critical question. I
Yeah,
guess
I
the
was
simpler
gonna
answer is actually no. There's none.
But Sankara speaks on that when he does the speech in Harlem. He speaks on that and he says that they must be taken care of because when we let's talk about now our Western lives, right? When we're in rooms, in business rooms, talking about barriers to profit and all that, we analyze what the barriers are and then we tackle and decide what we're going to do to take them down. So we have identified in Africa that we have the barrier of Black people, not just in Africa, beyond outside the borders. In Jamaica, you have it. Walter Rodney was killed in Guyana. You have it. You have it in the US. You have it in the UK. Black people who are intentionally sabotaging Black liberation by taking on the white man's way of being, by taking on money, by shutting down Black people who want to rise and get liberation today. That Black person, we have to figure out how we are going to deal with them. But quickly, as I steal a moment to speak, I will say we don't have to come up with new ways to have solutions. Those who came before us have analyzed, they've looked at the situation, they have some. We just need to go look at them and see if we can implement in today's world. And Baba Sheikh Anta Diop has 15 steps and he names them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 15 of what we can do. And all we need is a think tank like Imagine Alkebulan to sit down and look at this and look at our world today and see how practical this can be, and then start. We can pick one. Which one can we implement now?
Right. It's very practical. In fact, I wanted to ask you to hold that book up because I was just going through that book last week. And it even talks about the importance of culture and language. And he explains why. And he says one of the languages that has potential to be promoted as a Pan-African language was Kiswahili. So you're spot on in the right direction. Somebody posted a question.
I know that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Somebody posted a question saying, isn't it true that Ethiopia actually defeated colonialism?
It is.
And I want to say it's true. In fact, I wrote a book about it, a graphic book called Adwa. So go to Amazon and get my celebration of Ethiopia's victory against colonialism. Thank you for that post.
And Brother Allimadi, as you say that, we're going to have to figure out how we can get your books into Black-owned bookstores so that we get off Amazon. We have to also start figuring out that needs to be a solution where we figure out how we can have relationships with Black bookstores where that's where our books can be sold and not.
And I'm glad you brought that up because several Black bookstores tried to get my book and never got it.
And Brother Milton.
And this is can I just interject? And this is basically where, as the people, this is basically what we at the Emerging Alkebulan are trying to do. You know, we're trying to bring people together. That's basically our key focus. Unite in whatever way, through Milton's books, through businesses, through collaborations, networking, you name it. You said it, Nduku. Look at us. We are all over the world. We are all over the world. It doesn't matter where you look. There's a Black person there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Through my link, through my posts, through my links, you know, every so often when I put posts out, there's always a white person who will come in there and prefer solutions, and it gets up my nose because when a Black person's talking, I'm talking to Black people, but for some reason they see the need to come in there. I think, okay, yeah, we know, and this is basically one of our problems. And a lot of people would just I'll see people, DM me, you know, blah blah blah, and we have this big problem. So we need to unite, guys. I don't know how I say.
I always tell those white people to take a seat because this is not their space to speak.
I try not to be too rude.
I don't care about that. Yeah. Their feelings do not matter to me. Go on.
Yeah, so basically we need to unite. We need to collaborate. And basically, like Milton said, the mindset is the key. Based on what we said so far, guys, just to round it up, where do we go from here? What are the key solutions? What are the key points that we need to take away from this broadcast tonight? What are the key things that at least one or two that we can actually let people know, okay, where do we go from here? What can we actually do? Because basically, like we said, we can overanalyze, but at the same time, we need solutions. One or two things that people could take away from the broadcast tonight, guys, please.
I wanted to say to Big Brother, I wanted to say to Big Brother Milton there that besides, collaborating with Black printing houses and all of those things, we as the Emerging Alkebulan is also in the business of building an online library, references, because soon, and not soon enough, we need to have a book burning ceremony in chapters across Africa.
Absolutely.
Because I read a book, history book, that made my teacher say, I want him to take history until matric because it's going to be he's going to be my A student. And I didn't take history because I was uncomfortable as a child with the history that was forced down my throat. But when you read Chancellor Williams and Diop and and others, these are the books that we need to expose our kids to. These are the books that we need to go and find our movie producers, our documentary producers, to make it fun to learn where you come from.
Yes, absolutely.
And Oladila, I know you said we're over analyzing, but there was a reason that I asked my big brother there, which African country actually won liberation.
Right.
Because again, if you take my country, we fought for freedom. I was in the streets. I lived. I spent my youth being anxious about being if I see a police van, it's crazy. I was hidden in a car trunk of a high school campus after speaking there in 1989. I fought for freedom, and what did I get? What did my people get? They got democracy. And what the hell is that? Because that democracy is defined in the political science books of the North. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, all of them, right? Everybody forgets about the purest form of democracy that I know. If you read Chancellor Williams, I doubt there is a better form of democracy than what was on the continent of Africa. So much so that I firmly believe, and people call me bloodthirsty, I firmly believe in revolution. if you let me, Brother Milton. So I went to study a master's degree in international relations in Brighton, there where Brother Oladila is. And, I was working in the president's office, and on my first day in political science class, the professor says the African National Congress government in South Africa is the exact same as the National Party government that just left the stage. And was that a big battle on my first day with the guy that was going to mark my final paper, right? I mean, he made the biggest mistake ever. And ever since, I realized that I made a big fool of myself, because it's true. We didn't win this country. We swapped the faces around.
Yes.
But instead of swapping the focus around, we were faced with white fears, black aspirations. What did we choose as a black organization? White fears. And Nduko might not like this, but everybody but let me rather say this. I'll come back to the other name now. From Nelson Mandela up until Cyril Ramaphosa is part of a program of having been given this independence and democracy and so on.
I agree.
As long as you do, like Macron is very shameless and unequivocal, but you have to do these things, right? And so we've been doing those things. Nelson Mandela came and made as if the RDP is going to be the economic roadmap for South Africa, but he also knew that he was a fad. Nelson Mandela was a fad. It lasted 5 years. So, Thabo Mbeki and this guy from Mitchell's Plain, Trevor Manuel, they are students, they are products of the IMF and the World Bank. And so until we say South Africa doesn't need the most progressive constitution in the world, which is what we have. Why the hell do we need the most progressive constitution in the world? Our democracy is 30 years old. I mean, our constitution is more progressive than 300-year-old democracy.
Africa looks good on paper. Africa looks perfect on paper. The AU looks good on paper.
Yes.
This is what they want us to think. Placate ourselves, distract ourselves, and so on. So to come back, we are building a library of actually verified, curated indigenous African produced knowledge and information systems. Oladile, that's one of the things we need to do. If we're talking about the way forward and putting this under the education tab. For instance, I think the other critical point is some of the stuff that Nduku and Milton was raising earlier, and yourself, around cultural engagements and interactions. I mean, if you look at xenophobia in South Africa, it's the same as racism in the Western Cape. It is not a genuine thing. It doesn't come from anywhere, but it is delegated, and it is bought and paid for, right? And so we do actually need to be shamelessly interacting with each other, and I mean, we need to be traveling. I think there's now 2 countries we don't have visa requirements anymore between South Africa and 2 other countries. I mean, how does it take 30 years?
Ghana.
How does it take 30 years to remove visa requirements? I mean, come on, let's be serious about this for a change, So people movement and people processes, like the African polity, it's easy. Africans travel. Let's engage and learn from each other, and even, like market other parts of Africa to ourselves, to our spheres of influence, even outside of our spheres of influence, using social media and so on and so on. These are just some of the things. I mean, I, for instance, have a problem with the way another big event that is happening right now is the Rugby World Cup. I'm a former All Black supporter. Trying to tell myself that I now support rugby and not just the All Blacks, right? But my fellow All Black supporters and the South African Springbok rugby team supporters, I started looking at these World Cups for the last 30 years. Well, actually from 74, right, when I was a kid. It is a showpiece for 6 countries, but they play 16. So 10 countries make up the numbers. And the way that I see it is that the state of rugby is as a result of the balance of forces. So here's the analogy, right? The South has been dominating. I'm talking about the rugby South. It's been dominating rugby. And all those Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, Canada, America, all the other rugby playing nations, they are just plodding on, they're just continuing their thing. But I was saying, if the All Blacks lost last night and the Springboks lost tonight, and I don't know, maybe that game is on or whatever, then you would have for the first time an entirely Northern Hemisphere affair in the semifinals. And you probably have France and Ireland in the finals. And when that happens, then the balance of force and power shifts, and maybe they will redirect World Rugby's resources to go and develop the sport in those countries, that come to make up the numbers. And so the analogy is, if we stop looking at North and West and foreign aid and foreign this and that and the other, and we start here saying, we've got so many billionaires on the African continent. How does that fact alone start to shift things? Because if I have 5 billion and I give 1% for a program like this, what is going to happen? So these are the types of conversations, like the practical things that the African people can do without the white man, without the people from the West, without the people from the North. Because you see, if we use their resources, we will be owing them.
Exactly. And they'll control how we do go about it.
Comes with conditions, right?
Yes. I just, sorry, brother. Go on.
No. Please continue, Messi.
Just to piggyback on what you're saying, or at least to go from where you're saying, you talk about if you had 5 billion, you give a 10%. So solutions, and I was thinking, okay, let's talk about the books, let's talk about what has been said, but now I'm going to talk about practical solutions, things that I'm working on, and how Africans can support us, the community that we're working with, on these things. One of the things we're doing is teaching Kiswahili. So if you are an African, wherever you are, who believes that having a united language, having one African language is going to unite us and help us in this cause, reach out to me. I'll let you know how you can get access to that. We have our classes every Saturday. We have recordings of our previous classes. So if you didn't start with us, you can catch up. There's a chance for you to catch up. The other thing I want to do now is start a publishing and translating business. So when I do reach out to Africans, do support that 10% of whatever it is that you have in your pocket. Please give it. We're also going to be doing a youth event that is scheduled for next May, so that we can start involving our youth in this work, and we will start putting out information about this event once we have it locked down and a venue locked down in New York. But we will need support from you. We will need funding to support the budget for the event. So when you see things like these, I'll be putting them out on LinkedIn. Please support them. So what is the publishing and the translating company going to do, or organization going to do? We're going to take books like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which Baba Rodney wanted to be translated in Kiswahili, and translate it. This is something I'm doing now, even before I know whether I'm going to get paid or not, because it's necessary. And that's another mindset we need to have as Africans. Don't always do things because you're getting money in exchange. I started translating this before I even knew whether I'm going to get paid or not, because it needs to be done. And even if I don't get paid on this, as long as this information can be read by a Tanzanian in Tanzania in Kiswahili, a Congolese in Congo in Kiswahili, who can understand why Congo has been the way it is, I've done my work and I'm good, and I can rest in peace. So we have to, again, change our mindset in that we support Black situations like this that are helping liberation, because I cannot do it by myself. I don't have the funds to do it by myself. And there are many other projects that will require our support. But your $5, your $2, your $10 makes millions. But if only one person is giving, then that's a burden. So that's another way we need to come together to support and work on solutions that we are actually practically working on now. Thank you so much for having me, brothers. It was great being here for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'm just going to round things up. We've headed so much there. Just picking back on what Unduku was saying. Another challenge we're facing right now is social media. Social media is one of the biggest problems we're facing. Obviously, a lot of us get restricted. I know quite a few people have been restricted on social media because of what we're saying. And when we're saying the right things, okay, the mainstream media or the guys who control the narratives don't want us to say these things. So we're getting to that stage where we're being censored. And I've been censored for the last 3. Facebook, basically, I just had to get away from it because I can't say what I want to say. LinkedIn is not doing too bad, but I've been censored twice on LinkedIn. So we need to find ways to actually build our own Alkebulan networking groups. And like Unduku said, we need to do things together, because basically we need to do the work. It's not about getting paid. It's like some of us just need to start doing the work. So networking, social media platforms that is Afrocentric, that we can actually tell our own stories.
And we have them, brother. Quickly, let me just say, I'm going to post it on my LinkedIn today or tomorrow. A Black-owned that is starting now. Social media site that you can go to, where we can be as Black as we want to, and we can speak the truth. But yes, look out for that.
Yeah, so that's one solution there. Also, in terms of businesses, we need to pull together, guys. Initiatives are going to be coming up. We just need to pull together. There's going to be loads of things we need to do. The Emerging Alkebulan's got so many things in terms of where we want to go, but there's so many things coming up. So just stick with us. Just watch this space. That we're going to be training out initiatives out there. Historical perspectives. We're going to gain people on every month. Like I said, I promise you, every month we're going to gain people who are going to tell history, who are going to educate us. Our mindset needs to change. Religious, I'm one of those guys. I challenge that religion a lot. It's basically, it's one of those things that's kept us where we are. One of those guys, I break it all down, because I've got so far to the thing that without religion, if we stuck to our African religion, we're probably in a better place. Because the moment they introduce something different to us, which is not original to us, it's messed up our minds. that we need to go back to basics. So there's a lot of things that we need to talk about. We're going to be bringing people on who are going to talk into these different topics. But the key to what we're talking about today is basically the mindset, the collaboration, and the unity. Those three things are very important. So guys, let's work together. Let's lock it down. Things need to be done. As you can see, my co-host there, we're all sold out to the course. We are here to do what we need to do. Join us wherever you are. Follow our websites, read the books, everything that we recommend. Just do something different, guys. We have to do something different. Doing what we're doing over the last, 50, 70 years has not emancipated us at all. All we're doing is buy into agendas that has nothing to do with us. We need to get away from that. We actually need to get away from that. So guys, thanks for being part of this. Faisal, anything else you want to say? Milton, thank you very much. Nduku, thank you very much.
Asante.
Yeah,
thanks for being part of the podcast, guys. So I'll see you all soon. I really appreciate you guys.
Sorry,
thank you very much.
I just want to end off by saying we mustn't forget about food, because we live on a continent that is supposedly the food basket, the bread basket of the world. There's now new kinds of colonization. People buy land in Africa to grow food for them, but we have hunger and malnutrition in Africa. And I'm running programs and projects in any African country that's funded with farming for food in an ecological way and so on. Look, our work is completely cut out for ourselves. And as long as we have the appetite to serve and love our people, and I think my final word, Oladile, is how do we get to build? What is the first step that I have to take to build Pan-African unity? The first step. Hold on. The first
can you
step
just
that
please let me summarize the books, please?
Oladile, I am talking. The first.
Can you just summarize the books and we can go? The books that you recommended. Can you just summarize them for me, please?
Faisal, Oladile cannot hear you.
Why?
Oladile.
Okay.
Oladile, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, Faisal is speaking. I'll give you a thumbs up when he's done.
Okay.
All right.
The first step that we have to do in building this Pan-African unity is you go out of your house right now and go and find that African black brother that you hate on, that you don't like, that you're always fighting with, and go and love that guy. And if you can do that, African unity becomes a walk in the park, a piece of cake. I feel really strongly about that. And on that note, I want to thank Big Brother Oladile, Big Brother Milton, my sister Nduku, and I do want to learn Kiswahili, my sister, so I'm going to be joining your class and so on. And everyone else out there who's passionate about Pan-Africanism, the African plight, and the emerging, the big African lion is rearing its head from this deep slumber. And let us just be all hands on deck. And let's go and make this thing work. And we don't need 100% of Africans on the continent and in the diaspora. We just need enough of us.
Yeah. So the books you can start with: Black Africa, Sheikh Anta Diop, The Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State. The other book, so that you can understand why we are here, how it happened, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, I Will Say, by Baba Walter Rodney. I am reading these on Kumbukeni every Monday. This book, I'm reading a chapter every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. So you can join us on YouTube on Kumbukeni to listen to the readings. And we have recordings of the other chapters we have read. We are on chapter 4 now. And then the other one, if you can start, just to start to work, is Kwame Nkrumah's Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. If you start with those three, you will get to a place where your mind is decolonized enough for you to start helping with the work. Thank you.
And I'm going to add the last one to it. Africa Must Unite. I'm reading this one right now by Kwame Nkrumah. Thanks, guys.
And Oladele, this is one you would like also. African Religions in Western Scholarship by Okot Bitak.
Thank you, sir. I will, because I need more of that, man. Yep. So yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, guys, once again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Have a restful day.
I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.